In today's video, I would explain how third-party jars can be imported within PEGA and they can be used to enhance certain PEGA functionalities. Now, the normal way of importing third-party Java files, Java archive files, or which are called jar files into PEGA, and then using them are using functions, something called PEGA functions, and I'll be using that approach to show you how it's done. But I would not go into explaining in detail what a function is, so I'll just give you a very brief overview of what a function is. So functions are effectively Java snippets of code which can be reused across the entire PEGA application. Now, you might ask the question, what is the need for doing that? So you can also have, let's say, one piece of code within PEGA written in PEGA's language to also do the same thing. So a very typical example is going in and let's say finding PEGA's size of property list function, which is effectively you pass a page list name and it will give you how many pages are there under the page list, right? So this is, I think, used by everyone. So you can also do the same thing by simply writing a data transform and then looping through the page list, then having a counter and then getting the value, right? So why do you use a function? The reason for that is sometimes there are certain pieces of code which are reusable, but if you write it within the PEGA context, which means that writing it in a activity or a data transform sometimes is then limits its reusability, because then you have to, like, for example, always have a data transform so to be called whenever you're using it, right? And sometimes calling a data transform is not so easy, or calling an activity is not so easy. But you can do that, but if you write a function, because functions can be referenced practically everywhere. So a good example of that is you can call a Java function within, let's say, a validate rule. You can see how it's called here. You can also see a when rule where it's called. You can also see another, let's say, like another when rule also is there. You can also find edit inputs, and there are many places in which functions can be called. But let's say a data transform or an activity is not so easily called within a, let's say, a when rule or a validate rule. So that is the primary functionality of a function, and functions are usually wrapped inside something called a library. So what is a library? Library is effectively a logical wrapper which, let's say, wraps a module inside it. So if you have, let's say, a functionality called, let's say, PDF generation and certain customizations within PDF. So what you do is you create a let's say a component, and then you put a library inside it called PDF customizations, and then you put all the functionalities, all the functions, all the Java codes related to PDF customizations within that library. Now, if you have, for example, let's say something to do with, let's say, JSON mapping, you don't put that inside PDF customizations. You create a separate library called JSON mapping, and then you put everything inside it. So that is how you logically group the functionalities. So a function is not written standalone. You first need to create a library, and then you need to put it inside the put the function inside the library. So you can find that within the technical section of the records. You can find both function and library here. So that is the introductory part of this video that explains in brief what a function does and how it actually works. So we will try to see how we can use a third-party jar within PEGA. Using a third-party jar file, there are certain steps which we need to take, because third-party jar files are never used very lightly within PEGA, okay? Because you don't know exactly how that will work, because PEGA has its own ways of doing things, right? So PEGA has its own inheritance, its own dependencies. Now, whenever you are trying to import a third-party jar, which is an external jar, right? So an external jar sometimes works outside that established hierarchy. So you might sometimes get unexpected consequences of, or let's say, unexpected behavior in your application. So it is always better to do these 3 steps first, okay? Number 1 is, whenever you feel that there is a need to import a third-party jar file, first check whether within the application itself, whether the required Java classes and methods which you are trying to use are already present or not. So PEGA has a out of the box jar catalog. I will show you how to access that. When you go through it and figure out whether you already have that method already present or not. If you don't have it, only then go to the next step. Second step is go and confirm with your LSA that you indeed require a third party jar. So you can of course publish your findings, and you can tell him or her that yes, this like I have searched for it, I couldn't find it, which means that I would desperately need to get that functionality done using a third party jar. Now if you're working within, let's say, a secure organization or let's say a bank, sometimes you also perhaps need to take an organizational approval. So your client side environment managers might also need to provide an approval. So please take that also while doing this. Okay. And number three is take a cold backup of the environment. Now, what is a cold backup? The cold backup means the servers need to be down when you take the actual backup. So take a backup of the environment and then import your jar file. Now this is again, sometimes people might say this is too much, it might be an overkill. Indeed, it might sound as an overkill, but it is always good if you don't know exactly what that jar file contains. You might have certain things which might intimately change PEGA's, let's say, string conversion. I'm just giving an example, but you might have certain scenarios like that as well. So if you have certain things like this, be very careful while importing it, and take a cold backup of the environment and then import it, and then do a smoke testing of the entire environment, that yes, everything is working, not only the intended functionality but also the functionality of the overall application. When you check that okay, everything is working fine, then and only then say that yes, the third party jar is working correctly. Now before we start going into PEGA and start importing a third party jar file, let's try to frame a use case first. Okay, so I'm currently working on a component which allows me to do integration with MongoDB databases. Now MongoDB is a very well known NoSQL database, but PEGA doesn't really have any functionality which allows me to do that out of the box. Okay, so I need to import a third party jar in order for me to actually make that integration, right? So how do I know that? So again, there are many ways of knowing it. You can search in Google and see what jar files, what Java methods and functions are required. So I kind of went through my period of education on this by doing a Java a project on this. So I did a Java project, and I figured out what methods I need, what classes I need. So I did that on my own Java IDE. So once I have that ready in Java, I now want to use the same code within PEGA, right? Now for that, what I understand is there is this jar file called Mongo Java driver, which actually has this jar file. I mean, the jar file name is Mongo Java driver, and it actually has all these classes underneath it. So you can find it here. You can find it. I think it's in inside client. You can find all these classes and you know all the other interfaces. So some of them will be required. Most of them will be not required, right? So I need to import this and get the information done. Now first, I mean, get the process done. Now the first thing I would need to do is figure out whether these are already present within PEGA. So how do I do that? So in PEGA there is a class, or rather there is a I'll explain the table first. So there is a table. So the table name is called PR underscore engine classes. Let's do a query on it. PR underscore engine classes. This class gives you it's rules dot, but then select star from, yeah, I don't know what happened, but anyway, as you can see now, it actually shows me a list of like jar files. So you can actually see these jar files and you can figure out whether the class or the package that you're looking for actually is present within this or not. So what you can do is you can do a search. So this pz jar column gives you the jar file name, okay, and the package is the package underneath it. Okay, you also have the class column which gives you the list of classes. So I can simply do a search on the class pz class like mongo percentage, and I can do a search. So so as you can see, there is nothing much which I can use. So I actually need to have the the normal, the normal Mongo collection. So I have a package called Mongo collection, and I need to use that to actually make the actual the integration work. But the Mongo collection, with this Mongo com.mongodb.client, and inside it I need to get this Mongo collection interface. So you can see it here. I've actually used it extensively, Mongo connection, but I need to get this one as well as the CRUD operations, class used directly within PEGA. But I cannot find it, right? Because as you can see, the PZ class does not have any of them. Now you can also find this within PEGA. How you can do it? You can go into PEGA and you can search on this class called system runtime code. System runtime code is also actually integrated with the class called the table called PR_engine classes. So as you can see here, you can find all the exact same information which I searched on the Postgres database. You can also find it here. So if you ever forget what exactly is the class name or the table name, if you are unfortunate enough to forget both of them, then it is a bit difficult. But if you remember at least one of them, I mean system runtime code or PR_engine classes I think is a bit easier to remember. Then you can simply go to the database table option here, and you can simply search with engine, which I do very often because I keep on forgetting the class name. So you can just find it from here. So when you do a search on this table, you will figure out whether the jar file or rather the methods or the classes which you require are already present within PEGA or not. If it's not present, then your code will not work. Okay. So I have again written a small piece of code inside this library called MongoDB test I have created. Inside the MongoDB test library, I have created a function. The function has some basic code, and this is again the same code which I wrote here. It's just a PEGA version of it. So it's again not the entire code. It's just a very simple piece of it. But you can see how I'm actually using it. I'll come to that a bit later. But if I click on this option, which means that now the actual code will be compiled, and if I click on this save, you can see all the errors are showing up. It says com.mongodb is not allowed, or it's not understood. So that means that these are not understood because the class and the method underneath it is not within PEGA. So we need to first import it. Until we import it, this will not work. Okay. So since this code does not work, what should be the next steps? Now, of course, I function as an LSA within my own application and in real life as well. So if, for example, I need to import a jar file, I can take the decision myself. Also, I would also want to have, for example, some backup done of the application. Again, since I'm using a PEGA person edition, I'm not taking a backup. I can simply stop doing certain things and create a new instance of it. So as of now, I'm not going to take the backup, and it is assumed that I know what exactly the risks and the rewards of importing a third-party jar is. And also it is assumed that the LSA of the team knows that what the jar file does, and importing it will not affect any other applications or any other aspects of the application which is already present within the environment. Okay, so let's try fixing this issue. Okay, so first of all, what I will do is I will uncheck this and I'll save it. So you can see that the code again compiles, which effectively means that the Java code is not compiled. It just treated as text. Okay, now what I will do is I already have the jar file somewhere. I'll see if I can find it. I think it's here. So I already have this jar file present. So I will simply import it. Let's see. The importing of a jar file happens in the way in which normal package works. So it's the same thing. I will go to this browse, I will import it. I will go to documents, I'll go to testing, I'll go to this jar file, and I'll just simply copy it over. And then I'll click on next. It gives me some information regarding what the file is and how exactly it has been packaged. I don't usually read through this, but again, if you want to have a more detail and you know exactly what you're looking at, then you can of course go through it and confirm whether the information is correct. The next, it will ask for a default customer code set. Now code set effectively are default values which are associated with it. PEGA, this kind of works as a rule set version for the custom jar code which is coming in. So if you want to choose something else, you can do it. I don't change it, it still remains the same. Okay, now I click on next. It shows me what methods are coming in, or what classes are coming in within the jar file I'm trying to import. So you can see that it actually has all the ones. Now here, what the important thing is, since we already know what functions we're going to use, it's very important or imperative for the developer to actually check whether the methods or the classes, I will not say methods, the classes which the person is trying to use, they're within this or not. If it's not there, then you have to, for example, then change your strategy. But of course here I'm assuming that the code is there because I know it's there. So I can also just check it once more. I can see, I think it's MongoDB collection. So I think it's there. Yeah, DB collection, MongoDB collections, everything is here. So I would click on next from here. And as you can see, it is now importing. So now it's imported and it says code archives have been imported. Restart PEGA platform to activate the changes. So this is very important, of course. I click on done. And if I, for example, go back and click on this and save, it will not work because the restart is required for PEGA to update its class path in order for it to be able to use those codes which I have just activated. So until that restart happens, it will not work in the way that we expect it to work. So the next step, of course, would be to go and do the restart. I will do the restart of the environment and then we'll come back to it. Server restart is done. I'll go back to PEGA. I'll log in and I'll go back to that function which I had written before. And I'll now check this checkbox and click on save. Yeah, this one has an issue. This is the parameter. It's not there. Okay, this is a different issue. This is not a problem. But if I click on save now, so as you can see, all the other ones which are required, all of them are now actually working fine. So as you can see, the Mongo database, like a database object, or the Mongo URI, or all of the ones which I actually need now are actually being accepted by PEGA. So if I, for example, go back to the runtime code, system runtime code, and if I search with Mongo, you will see that all the classes, everything I've just installed, they are all here. So if I go back to that, so now ideally what should happen is you can just go through the code. For example, you need Mongo collection, right? The Mongo collection the class. So what you can do is you can simply go to the runtime code and you can search with the class name. You can see that the Mongo collection class is actually present. So all of these are now present within PEGA. So it's just a matter of going through the code and finding whether every class or every method that you require from that jar file is indeed present or not. Okay, so once that is done, then it's simply a matter of writing the code properly and then checking whether the code works to your satisfaction, and not only that, the application as a whole is healthy and it's functioning properly. So those 2 points are then next needed to be done. Of course, I don't have the entire code written. I am actually changing it into a component, so I'm currently working on that, but the actual code is not completely there yet, but I will work on that. Also, another point which is very, very important, and that is not specifically related to only third-party jars, but whenever you are using any classes, right, you need to give the entire path. So you can see it here on PEGA, outside PEGA in Java. So whenever we are using it, right, suppose if I want to, let's say, use the Mongo collection class, right, this one, the one that I'm using, let's say the Mongo collection, I want to create a Mongo collection object. So I can simply call Mongo, write it like this, Mongo collection. Okay, or rather, if I, for example, take the Mongo collection one, I can then simply create an object with call Mongo collection and then do a new and then call it. And that is how PEGA, that is how Java usually works. But in PEGA you can't do it like that, because here what will happen is if you use it, PEGA will not be able to understand how the overall structure works. Okay, so what will happen then is, so you need to give the entire package path for every one of these classes. So you can see com.mongodb.client.mongo collection and then Mongo collection like this. Okay, you can so normally what we do in Java is we first do the import, and then all the classes within this package is actually available within this structure. But that kind of a structure all does not work in PEGA. So you need to give the entire class path, including the package names, everything. So as you can see here, that is how it needs to be done. A small question which might come up while working on this third-party jar is, okay, now that I've installed it in dev environment, how do I then import that into higher environments? Do I have to manually go into every environment and then manually upload the third-party jar file only? The answer is no. You can of course do that. There is nothing stopping you from deploying your normal code and then importing your third-party jar. But what you can do is, there's a simpler way. You can go into product tool. You can go into this query jar files option within a product tool, and there you can give your jar name. If you click on query jars, it shows you the Mongo Java driver.jar file. You can select it. It will automatically be added as part of your zip file, which will be deployed. So once you do that, you can then of course check it in. So what this does is, next time when you, for example, take the zip directly from the product tool, you can, once this is done, it will then automatically also install the third-party jar. But again, that does not negate the need for a server restart. When you do this, when you then do this deployment into the test or acceptance or prod environment, it will then again ask you to do a server restart, and the server restart is mandatory, so it needs to be done anyway. Okay. Once you're satisfied that the third-party jar is working as expected, and you have all the functionalities which you require, then it is just a matter of simply checking in the code. It's always better to check in a function and then use it, because otherwise it might not work properly. And then once it is done, just generate the function from here. You can see the library has been generated successfully, and then also generate the library, which means it will recompile the entire library which you actually have specified here. So all the functions, everything, they actually will be checked in conjunction, and then all of them will be recompiled. So once this is done, then your function is ready to be used. So again, the usage and the reference of the function would follow standard practices. There will be no special requirements there. It's just, once this is done, you can then inform your team and your LSA that the third-party jar has been successfully imported. So that is how it works. So I think that is about it. There is nothing much else which is needed to be required to be understood for anyone while working on third-party jars. Be very careful and know exactly what you're trying to do, and then once you import the function, check your application very, very well. Once you do those three things, you shouldn't have any issues with it. If you still have any problems while using it, please let me know. I will try to see if I can help you out. And if you have any questions about the video, please leave a comment on the video. And also please like, share, subscribe. Thank you.